Yeah, Professor Meena.
Hello. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a question which, in a different way, I want to ask both of you. But first, I want to ask Ram. I've been thinking about this for some time that uh, we tend to think about questions of identity, dignity, usually in terms of a binary that you have one person who seeks recognition or one group seeking recognition from another. And we are thinking of the dynamics of that. But I think that, especially thinking in the diaspora context, I'm thinking that there's always a third in the presence of which this uh, negotiation of identity is taking place. And if you're thinking of this third party, and I'm thinking of those who are not a part of the caste world, this is for you, Ram. We are in the diaspora context. We are trying to get to grips with how to get have ourselves recognized and have dignity when there are other people who really don't understand or not fully informed and are in that position where they wouldn't know how to support one or another claim. And that really complicates, I think, how we demand. It's like in one go we are talking to two different publics. We are not talking to just the one. And so you have to appear both reasonable as well as demanding. You have to appear reasonable in the way you ask for dignity, expect dignity, pull back on your expectations, because this third party has got some role to play. And of course I have the Cisco case in mind here when I'm saying this, but I think that I think that dynamic of how we are, how we fight in a struggle for dignity, always keeping in mind this third party, maybe very visible, maybe invisible, but nonetheless an appeal to that. Similarly, I think I want to say, ask Gaurav, and you can separately answer. So Gaurav, you also described the dynamic between left and Dalit groups again as a confrontation between two groups which are coming to terms with each other. And but there's a third. There is always a third. I mean, in the context of which this struggle is taking place, right? Now that might be an antagonist, or that might be potential friend, and maybe there are many thirds in the case of the student political situation that you are describing. And again, I'm interested in the sort of people who land up in Cisco or in Google, etc., who have not been a party, who are not one or the other, who are neither maybe Dalits, or very few of them are, nor are they on the left. Very few of them are. The majority of these people are coming from this third sector, right? So I'm interested in what is happening with our relationship with this dormant, not so active, nonetheless a player which has a bearing on the outcome of whatever will be the outcome of the negotiation between the two main antagonists, or whatever we are thinking of. I don't know if I made myself clear, but I think that's Ram first, and maybe Gaurav also wants to say something. I'll mute myself now.
Thanks for the question, Meena. I think, as usual, the issue is complicated. The third party is here. On the one hand, we have to think of there is also, we are minorities as an immigrants. Then there is religion is a protected category here. So a lot of times culture is smuggled under the rubric of religion is also sold here. So I think that's really the education has to be done at that level. So looking at what are the ways, what is culture, and how the culturalization of the identities, and how it's also tied to Hinduism, the way it is portrayed in the diaspora. And that's one level, because there is a certain cultural capital comes with yoga and all bunch of other stuff. It's really a big way going on here. So there is a kind of decolonizing we have to do. The decolonizing project really would be one way to think about it, because we need to decolonize the appropriation of certain cultural, like certain things like yoga and other ideas. But at the same time, the complexity of the grammar, the cultural grammar of these categories. And I think that we need to educate. I usually do it with whenever I teach an immigration course, the second generation always asks these questions because for them, it is part of their identity. So when you really question that, they really try to understand what it is. They'll say, my father is a Brahmin or something, or my father is a Gounder, as if they don't have any connection to that, or what kind of cultural capital helped them to move, how the caste has migrated here. So I think there is a way, so being the positionality, the marginalized position provides certain space for reflection, definitely for second generation. For some dormant people, I think Gaurav has a better way of talking about them. The dormant group also, all of a sudden, they are immigrants here, and you are discriminated. And the discrimination that's also going through, at least what we found in the sociological data, is there is first there is a euphoria of coming here. It's like a bell curve. Then they realize by the time they reach middle age, a lot of doors are not open for them, being a brown person, and the brownness affect their career. Then their well-being goes down. So there are moments of reflection, and I think we need to identify those moments as activists, and how to help them to connect. I mean, it's a three-pronged object. One is the decolonizing part, so that there is a romanticized idea of what Indian culture is, which is the Americans embrace, at least in the US I'm talking about. Then really deconstruct that. Then also with the cultural grammar, try to understand that part, help them. Then work with the second generation, what it means, and how this marginalized position itself help them to really create a sense of awareness, which could be a potential for intervention or a space for it, work on that. I think that's really, then the first generation has a different idea where depending on where their position is and how to understand even the grammar of discrimination and how to help them to really think through that so that they don't get into this idealized identity mode where they kind of recreate and idealize a sense of Indianness, or we have all these mythologies. They recreate some new histories about who they are, just to resist the temptation so that they can understand the real consequences, material consequences, as well as social consequences of these constructions. So I let Gaurav talk about this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Ram. And I think Meena raised an interesting way, actually, the way she's putting out this third party, which, I think as a cultural sociologist, I look at this question as, if I in the direction of answering Meena's, that three things: caste, class, and ideology. Right. So here I think the third one, which is ideology, is what actually guides these two. And now caste and class is also comes under a broader category, which I already discussed, the experience, is that lived experience now. Now, I concluded in some of my paper that what we call campus culture in India is basically a caste culture. Yes. Right. So now culture here, I'm not talking culture as a culture here is not an archaeology. It's not a matter of ontology. It is not a matter of being or of becoming, and it is a production. Right now, Ram, what you raised this interesting issue about first generation. Now, for first generation, now think of all these issues of caste, class, ideology, experience, and all the ontological practices. Now, for first generation, this is there actually it comes that this third party, which Meena is saying, this keeps shifting. Sometimes class becomes the third party. Sometimes ideology becomes the third party. And let me give you an example that how I think Marx or Engels won't answer this question. I am a big fan of Stuart Hall. That kind of somehow is I think Stuart Hall is more close to me in that sense, which he can answer this. He can basically have these possibilities of because he said ideology as a kind of alternative possibility, not as an overarching. Let me give you one example from my fieldwork. When I was doing fieldwork in Telangana, of the radical movement. So I was told that once upon a time in early 80s, left movement in Andhra Pradesh region was divided in 72 different groups, right? So now when I asked some of those who actually came out from Naxalism or Maoism and then became different other activists, when I asked them that why did you get separated from the main ideological group, the first group, and each one of them answered the same way. Said, "Oh, we had some ideological issues.
Yes.
We had some ideological issues." And now I said that this is such a simple ideology, class ideology. There are two classes, and what the hell? I mean, why can't you understand these things? What is that that is causing all this groupism in the? And that's where I think Stuart Hall helps us understanding this whole complexities of ideologies, that it is not just about ideologies. This is I think what Meena said, the third thing, and that is the experience, the individual's experience that comes from the culture, he comes from the class he comes from, and that is what decides the future of an organization. That is what they decide of the goal of an organization. And that is why you see, we always say that when it comes, because ideology is also linked with power, right? And that changes the entire pattern of what we are thinking in terms of ideology. So I think, yeah, I mean, we can go on, but yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gaurav and Ram, for the explanation. Before, now I have seen Somalingam and Sand Rising. That I would like to add a couple of things before that. One is when both the speakers connect the different intersectionality of class and caste, and Gaurav touched upon even what Marx cannot answer that Paul can answer. This is very obvious, very true also. I would like to mention one thing from the historical perspective, that from the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. It is so interesting. Frederick Douglass and Marx might have born on the same year. It is very evident that Marx born in 1818, but it is around the time Frederick born. But nobody knows that what year Frederick born, because he himself does not know, because the age of a slave is measured or counted by when a particular pony or a horse was born in that season. Very interestingly, when Douglass wrote his narrative, it is 1848. It is the same time Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto. So both are 30. So some people definitely argue that Marx cannot write the narrative as the Douglass cannot write the manifesto. But the point is, both have presented their life experience in terms of organic intellectualism, and for Marx, it is the genius comprehension of his worldview. And when it comes to the dignity with respect to the class and caste, there is another narration from another incident from Frederick Douglass, which he quotes, which he writes about, that Douglass is a slave, but at least he had food to eat. As a slave, he's fed. But in order to learn English, he learned English from his white street friends. And how he got his education, he will take bread from the master and give to him. So if you look at that, the perspective of a white man, actually his dignity is questioned, because he has to get a bread from a slave which is stolen from a master's home. But these people work together and had a relation rather than work together. So this is where the whole complexity of dignity and the class and caste comes. Mostly Gaurav emphasis on class, caste, and of course now race also. That is where the Isabel Wilkerson completely deals the race towards through caste. In that he writes many things, and one important thing is he defines the caste as an operating system. You can say many, you can build many applications like sociology, economics, or culture, but caste is the operating system. So right now, that is a major challenge to the dignity of human being, is the intersectionality of all these things. So I would like to now have Somaya for the question. So are you able to unmute yourself? I think you should be able to.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes,
now
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Very nice. Very intellectually stimulating. Thank you very much. Do we have a lesson to learn, or can we forecast the future from the South African amalgamation, which is a couple of centuries old? There, they have come together in one form or another, and they're existing and improving. Is there any lessons to be learned from them?
I think one of the things in South African context is I've been working on a project with someone. They have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So that's a very interesting way to really think about conflict. So none of the Asian countries were able to do that. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has been tried in Latin American countries, few countries, with a reasonable success. But they have a vision to really have how we can actually forgive. And I'm not so sure we can bring something like that. A movement like that could ethically help us to engage with the conflicts and other things. So that'll be this sort of a bigger question. So that's very unique about South Africa. I think there is, there are a lot of other issues they're going through. That's a different story. But how they come together, that's a vision. Desmond Tutu and Mandela has this vision of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm just reading there some of the testimonies. They're all available online. It's pretty amazing, and how some of the. I wonder whether we have we can have an experiment like that in Sri Lanka, for that matter. So we talked about Sri Lanka, whether we can have ethnic conflict or the issues in. So anyway, something like that, more as a critical, reflective space for ethical discussion about who we are. Gaurav.
Oh no, I think I'm okay. Ram has answered. Okay.
Can I say something?
Sure.
On this, on the question of caste, I find that because people who are privileged are so caught in reproducing the structures of dependence on those on whose labor they rely, that it doesn't make sense to me how possibly they could engage in this seeking forgiveness. There's no point in seeking forgiveness if you're actually not going to change your life. If you continue to invest in, because the difference in the South African case is that although some people will not agree with this, that the life of apartheid hasn't been completely left behind. But the Truth and Reconciliation Committee assumes that that is left behind, and now we can look at the past as the past. But we are not in that position with respect to any atrocity or anything which has to do with caste, because the past is not the past, it is our present. So in engaging in anything which is connected with memory or forgiveness means drawing a line at least at what is the past. And I think that if that line can't be drawn, and if it's a present which is being reproduced, there isn't really that option of seeking forgiveness or only in some cases. I have also heard being said actually in a webinar a couple of days, 3-4 days ago, and that was that we should treat the question of caste, especially where it is connected with slavery, similar to the case of slavery with respect to Black slavery among Black people, and we should raise the question of reparations. Now that makes some sense in that we are talking about a distant past. We are talking about a past where people have been disinherited from what belonged to them, and therefore you can possibly raise some question of reparations. Even that is hugely complicated, but nonetheless. But in case of directly being responsible for having participated in, not as agents, but as complicit members of society, where you have benefited from the work, the labor, etc. of some people, who are you going to ask forgiveness from? because you are still continuing to be in that position of exploiters, of people who are making use of other people.
Thank you. Thank you, Meena. I think, yeah, Professor Balmurli.
Yeah, hi.
Question or question?
What? Anyway, I want to thank both Ram as well as Gaurav for very good, grounded, fine-grained, and provocative talks. So I want to, invite both of them to weigh in on something which is implicit in both their presentations. While Ram starts off with psychologically situated understanding of dignity and moves on to give it sociological life. Gaurav takes us in an interesting path through culture and ideology and how that distinguishes Dalit activism. And I want to actually have both of them say something about what Gaurav mentioned, that for Dalit activists, activism is a matter of survival, and he was citing someone else who's an anthropologist, I believe. And so I want to unpack that idea of survival and bring back materiality into both of this. Dignity as well as culture and ideology, both are material. And in what way then can we actually show that they are having some form of way to hit back at a very vulgar Marxism that only thinks about economics as material, but forgets that everything is actually material in terms of having material effects. I just wanted you to unpack it, and maybe it is more for Gaurav initially, the act of survival.
Thank you, Murli. Yeah, I think this is an interesting point. That's the question which provoked me this about looking at this angle of the movement. And so this person I was mentioning, she is a anthropologist at Stockholm University. Her name is Eva Maria Hartman, and she studied Dalit movements in India. And but yeah, this point you raised about the materiality, I think that's an interesting way to look at that, especially in terms of movements, and how these movements are especially what I call the hybrid movements, that where all these different ideological culmination and nothing coming out of it concretely, but it's kind of alliances are being made, and different new literature is being added. But where does it finally lead us to? Are we kind of getting a proper understanding of what this whole discrimination means? So I'm kind of very critical of also the way these alliances are formed. And I thank you, Murli. I would actually concentrate on this issue, and we'll dig deeper, and hopefully have more conversation with you on this to understand how should I go about it.
Thank you, Murli, for your kind words. And I think there is also, dignity also has a dark side, which I didn't get a chance to that is because I like it's not like it's very critical what Gaurav said. It's a survival, right, as a movement, and activism is a survival. That's a way. Basically what they're doing. They're fighting a system that's not. It's a forced assimilation in a way. They are thrown into a culture where the culture is not changing. Institutional culture is not changing to accommodate the needs of the new students, right? So there is a clash of culture in some sense. lack of a better word. So basically, the dominant group think when Dalits are asserting their dignity, that dignity infringes upon their dignity, as if dignity is in as a zero-sum game, which is the dark side of dignity. So if they are asserting, that means instead of respecting the effort, they really think that will infringe upon the dominant group's dignity. So they really see dignity as a zero-sum game, which has material consequences, whether how they treat you in the lab or who is giving information, because the institutional space is very implicit space, as academics we all know. So as an immigrant, when I came here, I didn't realize so many information, so much rules are implicit. I have to really learn a lot of them. So in a way, the same thing I would imagine Dalits are also going through. There's a new culture. It's like they are immigrants in their own country, going to the organization, using an immigrant framework. So all the rules of the games are not explicit for them. Activism is one way they share information, knowledge, challenge the existing practices and structures. And I think that's really an interesting, important way where we need to think about how the material consequences of the dignity asserted by our privileged group, which is our work you talk about the habitus, the impenetrable interlocked system of practices that keep the power in place, that has been challenged by Dalits because they fought for that space, and that's an important space that has to open. And it's so I think the normative claims can be violent here. That's what I'm saying. The institution think, oh, we do everything, everybody's same, and that's where the issues are. I think Gaurav's work really looks at the material aspects and a lot of detail, micro processes, getting that in how it works, how the organization works, what are the conversation discourses are. Yeah, I think we need to really be mindful of the darker side of dignity too, so that you can actually engage with it in a deeper way.
And just to add to you, Ram, one of the points which I keep highlighting in my research is that because, I mean, as a matter of fact, that most of the cultural and intellectual resources that Dalit students have, it comes through the university education, right? And the first generation learner, who enters in the university education, are the one who has to basically not just deal with this tumultuousness between when they enter in this higher education, because it's a kind of the whole elite culture they're exposed to, and at the same time there's the issue of identity, dignity, and also the cultural memory that one carries with that, and that reflects in their activism later. So what happens in the process, and for example, that I did study a little bit of these recent suicides. The majority of the suicides in higher educations are committed by the first generation learner. So that is one of the angle I think one can emphasize upon and build up on this, and that why is it that the cultural resources we are talking about, what is the relation of this with the first generation learner who come to higher education with a certain goal. And in that sense, the material aspect for them is much more important than the second and third generation. Like what we say the intellectual resources have much more meaning for the second and third generation, but for the material aspect, materiality of higher education is more linked to the first generation. So I think this is the kind of, there are all these interlinked issues which needs to be unpacked. And thank you, Murli, again for opening this up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Murali. Thank you very much for that question. It's a very practical question. And we have come to an end of this discussion series. I would like to thank both the speakers for their thought-provoking presentation and speech on this very complex subject of caste and dignity, and also the Murali's intervention and Professor Meena's intervention. When Murali says what is the material aspect, how you will unpack that question of a dignity when it comes to the material question. That is what I think we have seen in the Cisco case. What Gaurav says, that for a Dalit, the activism is survival. That is what exactly happened in John Doe's case. John Doe is an activist inside Cisco. When his dignity is questioned, as Professor Ram says, that he did not try to nullify, that he tried to assert his dignity, which is not able to be accepted or acceptable by the so-called oppressor caste, or the so-called upper caste, Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kopala. They are not able to tolerate that rather than nullify it. And this is where that all this complexity comes. But both the speakers have explained it in a very clear and lucid way, that how we can go forward from here by working with the question, with an arena of intersectionality, where the dignity of a different people are questioned in different arenas, but all these people have to come together. That is what Ambedkar called is in the biggest challenge is in the system of greater inequality. And Periyar very practically put that without abolishing the title of the Sudras, that the title of Panchamas cannot be abolished. He put in Tamil that Sutra Patam Pohamal, that Panchamar Patam Pohal. That is where the biggest challenge we have to bring all the forces against the caste. Even when both the speakers talks, that there is always a sense of a caste identity is present in every caste, where however close we are in friendship, however we are working closely with the people, eventually people try to see that you belong to this caste, so that I cannot trust you. This will be definitely that until the caste is completely annihilated, this cannot be overcome. But the people, those who are very determined and bold, that has to take all these challenges and go forward. And with this, we would like to stop here with the two announcements. One is our next discussion, and that is the last discussion in this series, will be presented. Our presenter will be Professor David Morse. He's a professor of social anthropology in the university, from the University of London. It will be on 5th September, Saturday, 10 a.m. PDT, and the respective time in other zones. And the second announcement is that as part of our AKAC reading and discussion, next book we have taken up is The Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. That is a very important book. So we are taking this up. That the discussion will take place on September 13th, Sunday, between 3 and 5 p.m. PDT. We will send announcement. So before closing, I would like to really thank both the speakers. We have a lot to learn from here and develop from here. And I'd like to thank all the participants on behalf of all the co-sponsors, and by saying have a good evening, have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye. We'll stop here. So if Professor Ram and Professor Gaurav would like to say any final words, and Professor Murali or Meena, anybody, you can please wrap it up in 1 or 2 minutes each, and we'll close for the day. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you, Karthik and Murali, and to be with and Gaurav for to be in this space to talk about it. I think it's an important questions we have been grappling with, especially coming to this immigrant space, the third dimension Meena talked about. I think all those things are important for us. So the complexity that should not prevent us from grappling with the issue. Hopefully we can use the tools we learn from these different disciplines to approach it, and using an interdisciplinary perspective. And I think this is a good step towards that. And also raising awareness, especially for people who are the dormant community who don't talk much about it. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Professor Ram.
Thank you, Karthik. And I forgot to mention thanks to all other sponsors. And thank you, Murali and Meena, for raising this interesting question. And I'll be in touch with you on this. Thank you again. Jai Bhim.